Hi, it's Tuesday morning. I'm coming in. I'm excited because there's coffee, and now I'm already blown away. This is unbelievably a powerful conversation. This is a powerful room I'm looking into, and now we have the vice president in Philadelphia as well to mark this moment, because when we have these dialogues in Philadelphia around the female leadership in Philadelphia, that matters. It matters in this city, it matters across this state, but it also matters across this country and to this democracy. And we are seeing so many unbelievably powerful women move the needle. And today we're gonna learn about how they've moved their needles in their careers and how we need to shore up our democracy and the vital role that the media plays in this. So let me introduce you to this rock star panel. First, we will begin with Errin Haines. Errin Haines is the editor-at-large and the founding mother of the 19th.
Okay.
Come on in. A nonprofit, independent newsroom focused on the intersection of gender, politics, and policy. She is also an MSNBC contributor. Prior to joining the 19th, Errin was the national writer on race and ethnicity for the Associated Press. She has worked for the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and the Orlando Sentinel. Errin's expertise on issues of race, gender, and politics make her a sought-after voice and thought leader in the industry. Please, everyone, welcome Errin. Next, we have Lisa Hughes, is the publisher and CEO of the Philadelphia Inquirer, where she has driven the digital transformation of the 194-year-old locally owned media company. She previously worked as a chief business officer and publisher of The New Yorker, successfully transitioning that iconic brand into a multi-platform business and long-term sustainable profitability. Hughes currently serves on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Philadelphia, as well as many other boards. Please welcome Lisa Hughes. And to round out this amazing panel, please meet Sarah Glover. She is the Vice President of News and Civic Dialogue at WHYY News. She's a veteran journalist and former managing editor of NPR News Minnesota Public Radio. She worked as a social media director, a digital strategist, and a photojournalist throughout her career. You're really all the realms there, amazing. And also has served 2 historic terms as the 21st president of the National Association of Black Journalists, the largest organization in the United States for journalists of color, and founded in 1975. Please welcome this amazing panel. So as I alluded, we're going to discuss the media and how to save our democracy. So lightweight on all 3 of you. None of us come to this stage or come to this table or anywhere we are without our story, without what brought us here. And that means the challenges as well as the triumphs. And what I'd love to start with, and Errin, let's start with you. Could you tell us your story of why the news? What were some of your challenges in your career? And what are the things that you look forward to moving forward in the next 10 years?
Sure. Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It is very exciting to be here with the Committee of 70, which is doing work around an issue that is very near and dear to me, which is voting. I work for a newsroom that is named for the 19th Amendment, which, as you all know, gave the access to the franchise for some, but not all women. If you've ever seen the 19th logo, there's an asterisk in our logo, and that asterisk is in recognition of the Black women who were frankly thrown under the bus as white women, gained their access to the franchise, and women of color had to work twice as hard to gain that over the next several decades. So democracy and media is a relationship that I've kind of always understood, even as a young person. Voting was so central and the news was so central to my life, even before I knew that I was going to do this as a profession. Grew up watching my local news and understanding even then that representation mattered, right? The anchors in my hometown of Atlanta were Black women, largely, a lot of Black reporters. in my hometown. And so even though, I didn't necessarily know at a young age that I wanted to be a journalist, I knew that that was an avenue that was available to me because there were people who looked like me that were doing that job. But I also came to understand through my local news and my local newspaper that journalism helped really as part of the fabric of a community, right? It was where I understood what my friends and neighbors and other family members were doing in my town. And so, we grew up reading the paper, grew up watching the news, and that was really, really important. I also grew up going to see my mom, who raised me and my brother, vote in every single election, whether it was president all the way down to whatever was on the ballot, referendums, you name it, she was there. And she took us with her, because she had to, but also because she wanted us to see that voting was something that adults did. It was something that was part of your duty and responsibility as a citizen. It's what it meant for you to be a citizen. And so 3 days after I turned 18, my mom took me to the same precinct that I'd gone to vote with her, and I registered at that same precinct. And we voted out of the same precinct the whole time I was in college. And she checked the rolls to make sure that I was there. But has my daughter been here yet? And it's like, okay. Same poll workers, mostly women, usually women of color, my whole life. I saw them, and so I understood also the role that women play on the front lines of this democracy and have always played. And so I think, I've thought about a lot of that consciously and subconsciously throughout my career. My first job in journalism was at a small black newspaper in Atlanta, the Atlanta Daily World. Shout out to the Black Press, which gave me my start in this profession. And what that experience really taught me was that our stories mattered. A lot of the stories that I wrote back then were on the front page of that paper, and as a young person, that told me that our stories were valid and that I didn't need to justify why we were writing about black folks doing any number of things, not just bad things, right? That those things belonged on the front page of the newspaper, and that was kind of an ethic that I carried with me throughout my career. But really always looking for the people who were not seen or heard enough in our democracy, telling their stories, wanting to bear witness on behalf of them. A lot of times as journalists, as reporters, we're able to go where the rest of the public can't go, and it's our responsibility to go and tell people what we're seeing there, and to hold people accountable, the people that we elect and are supposed to be representing us. And so fast forward to now, in 2020, basically decided that political journalism has been too white and too male for too long. And so we started the 19th. Myself and my four co-founders started our newsroom, really just wanting to center the people who have been on the margins of this democracy for too long. And frankly, just really going with the notion that women are not, a special interest group. We're half the population, we're more than half the electorate. Why don't we talk about women that way as participants in our democracy? And I just really love that this conversation is around women in public leadership, because it is past time to normalize women in leadership, not just having a seat at the table, but if we are not the ones who are also setting the agenda, if we are not also having conversations around how women are factoring into our politics, our policy, how women are really demonstrating what their power and leadership can mean in our democracy, in our communities, in our society, then we're not doing this right. So that's a lot of what we try to do with the 19th. And I think that is what has been missing in a lot of our political journalism. But I think the more examples that you see, it's kind of hard to continue to ignore what our contribution is. So,
amazing. We are not participants, we are leaders, and we're setting the agenda.
Absolutely.
Unbelievable, powerful words. We're going to come back to these words towards the end, but I'm going to try to grab them as we go through, because we need to all walk out of here and continue this forward for ourselves, for other women we know, and for people around the city. It's everyone that needs to understand this, and who's at the table and who's running the table. Lisa, would you like to kind of share your story of why the media, what the challenges were, and where you want to move forward?
Sure. When I was looking for a job, and I'm the oldest one on this panel, Back then, I decided I wanted to go into ideas, you know, book publishing, magazines, newspapers. I started in book publishing. I went on my whole slate of interviews. I'm a college graduate, and everywhere I went made me take a typing test. They didn't make the men do it, they only made the women do it, and of course I knew how to type, but I had to look, and they didn't let you look, and made tons of mistakes and did not get hired. So I went into magazine publishing instead. And I go to work for Condé Nast, which is a big publisher of women's magazines, Glamour, Vogue, Mademoiselle, you know, Self, etc. And there were no female publishers. So I start, you know, these magazines that reach every other woman in America are all run by men. All senior management is run by men. I remember when the first female publisher was named as the publisher of Self. And eventually, you know, I became a publisher myself. Eventually, coming to, you know, running the New Yorker, which was, you know, one of the crown jewels there, which was a sort of bastion of maledom. So that was a nice place to be, and make my mark. I come to Philadelphia and to the Inquirer as the first female publisher in 191 years. Wow. And, you know, I think, you know, there's an opportunity to use your power to do something. I am really proud that 3 years later, we have a masthead where white men are in the minority. Our editor is Latinx, our managing editor is a woman, our managing editor opinion is a black man, our managing editor visuals is a black woman, our managing editor sports is an Asian American. So, you know, we've started. Women now run almost every major desk in the newsroom. Business, breaking news, education, health, politics, features, what am I missing? Photography and visuals. And many of their deputies are women. We've gone from, I think, 42% women leadership, women in the newsroom to 47%, so we're almost at 50-50. And to Erin's point about women in leadership, you know, very, very important across the company. The newsroom's only half of our company. Of course, we've got huge product design and engineering, marketing, sales, and so on. And we've got women leading big divisions across the company. Representation is, of course, important too. So we have, you know, I think it's really important to have goals and hold yourself accountable and report out on those goals. So we look at BIPOC representation, of course, too, in leadership, because, you know, it's not just about gender. But, you know, it's I think to put a period in this sentence, long sentence, is, you know, how do you use your power when you are in leadership? And I look around the room to actually advocate for women and do something about it.
Unbelievable. And the point that you made to begin with is you were alone. And what does that alone, that in itself is difficult, is hard. And so instead of saying, I'm alone, this isn't for me, you said, I'm alone and I'm gonna take my power and do something to change that. So the next challenge is different for the next person. Unbelievably powerful. And now with this such, I love the idea that you dive into civic dialogue and the work that you've done. What got you here, Sarah? What was your energy around that?
I love this question because it could be a whole podcast. It could be like a 20-hour podcast. But one of the things that I wanted to start off by saying, and, you know, thank you to the Committee of 70 and the supporters and the folks in the room for including me in the discussion today. But one of the things that I wanted to start off sharing is that in all of our journeys, there's peaks and there's valleys. And I feel like there are more valleys than peaks. And do we ever talk about that? Do we ever actually prepare young women for all the valleys, you know, the down points? And so I really feel strongly that your journey and your career, and mine in particular, is about the valleys and, like, how did I react in a valley? How did I push myself forward? How did I reinvent myself? Certainly didn't have any master plans, but went in journalism from being a visual journalist, a photographer, to doing digital strategy for a national network with local stations across the country, to then getting into public leadership and public media, now working in audio audio and digital, and now having the great opportunity to lead the newsroom at WHYY. And it's a really great fit for me because, as you shared, Civic Dialogue is the cornerstone of what we do at WHYY, and it's a lot about the thread that has been present in my career. And I think that when I go way back to how did I even decide to become a journalist, it was two very pivotal things. The first of which was I was a paper girl. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, and you had to be 10 to have a paper route, and I didn't know that because when I was 9, the paper route that was in the neighbor's family, the oldest child was going to give the paper route up because he was 18, and because I used to follow him around, and he said, "Sarah, do you want to get the paper out?" And I said, "Yes." I ran home to my dad. I said, "Can I get the paper out?" So he called the Erie Daily Times, and they said, "You have to be 10. And so my dad said, "You can't get the paper out yet." And I said, "Well, I have 3 brothers. Why don't we put it in my older brother's name and we can do it together?" And so we did the paper out as a family for probably 7-ish or so years. And I peddled papers from about 7 to 13, and I have 2 younger brothers. So it became a family activity. So every day we did the afternoon, then it was the morning edition in the afternoon. So I read the paper every day. I looked at the front. I really paid attention to the layout, the headlines, like I was already doing SEO in 2nd grade. So I became very passionate about news and information, and that had a pretty big impact on me. And also just to see the customer service element of the news making. Mm-hmm. To deliver the paper, we always delivered to the front door. We never threw the paper on the driveway. So we were very clear about our customer service. We got good tips at Christmas time. These are all the skills that I learned just engaging with people, connecting with people, talking to people, not allowing gaps to be a part of the human condition, but to close the gaps was something that really kind of resonated with me. And then 2 other things. My dad actually spent a lot of my childhood embarrassing me because he took pictures of everything. And I remember being a really small child, and he'd show up at the recital or at the soccer game or whatever, taking pictures. Like, will he ever go away? He's always taking a picture. But around 9 or 10, when I started getting my money from my paper route, I had the best penny candy, and then I started to save up for a camera. And I had the best cameras. I had a 110 millimeter, a disc camera, I had a 35. I got into photography because I saw my dad taking pictures, and I was like, I can do better than that, because he'd print them out and they were awful out of focus. And so then at 14, I got my working papers and got a job at Little Caesars Pizza in the West Erie Plaza, I'll never forget. And then I saved up for 6 months, and I got my first Nikon 4004. And I took photography in high school, and I was just, I was kind of obsessed with it since my first little disc click camera. I had a purple one, as a matter of fact. Purple's my favorite color. I have it at home. I should have brought it with me. But I save that as a reminder of the hustle and the grind that's required to do what we do. And we have to really spend time as leaders kind of explaining that to up-and-coming journalists and media professionals, that there's a measure of practice, there's a measure of effort, and yes, there's talent is a factor, but there's work that's involved with this. It's not just given to you. It's not, and true skill is something you develop. It's not something that it's just you've got a halo around you and you're just awesome forever. You've got to work at being awesome every day. And so that exercise of taking photography in high school, and then people started telling me, you're good. And I say that to say affirmation is so important, and what I try to practice is telling people they're good at something, because that had such an impact on me as a young person that I could actually do this. I could go to journalism school. I could take a photography. I took photojournalism as my major. I could do this and be successful. And at the time, there weren't a lot of black photographers, let alone black women photographers. I worked at the Inquirer and then Daily News. So at the Inquirer, I was the 2nd black woman photographer hired, and at the Daily News, the 1st black woman to work at the Inquirer and Daily News. And that was something that was really important to me in the community. For 13 years, I cut my teeth here on the streets of Philadelphia and learned how to report and to visually report, and I'm really grateful for that. And too many times people would say, are you really a photographer? And I've got all this gear hanging on me. I'm like, no, I'm just playing one. I'm really a photographer, the kids in the schools and such. But the last thing that had an influence on me, and this is something that I wanted to share, is how the news impacts us. And we think about the last 3 years, actually the last maybe 5 or so years of all the polarization in our society that we are charged with documenting. But back in 7th grade, 1987, a person named Bud Dwyer committed public suicide at a press conference. And that was in January of 1987. He was the former state, I believe he was the treasurer at the time, and under a microscope for alleged corruption. And that had such an impact on me because kids were home from school that day. I think it was a snow day.
It was a snow day.
Yeah, it was either snow day or around MLK Day, but I saw that occur. And then being the paper girl, I peddled the papers the next day. And I really analyzed like what I saw and then how did the newspaper disseminate and report that information. And they did, I believe it was, if my memory serves me correct, it was a 3 screen grab prior to the actual shooting itself. But it really impressed upon me that our role as a journalist is, in good times and bad, we're here to not just create the record of the day, document the record of the day, but a step further now in terms of the realm of civic dialogue, that we really have an obligation to include communities in this process. And when I first learned journalism, I learned to type on a typewriter, and I did use film and Fixer. We didn't have digital cameras yet. But how media has evolved so quickly with technology that we're charging so quick to use the technology that we have to pause and get back to the human experience of just connecting with people and audiences and making sure that we're really telling stories that are germane to what's important to communities. So I think when I first learned journalism, it was a one-to-one relationship. We, the editors or reporters or visual staff, we were there to tell you the record of the day. Now we need to accept that this is a really circular communication mode, that we're here to serve audiences and really include them in the reportage, get feedback, and make some of our decisions based on what's useful to audiences, not just what we think is what they need to know. So it's a hard charge these days.
Being at the Constitution Center, you're speaking my language when you're talking about the role and responsibility of the press, of the First Amendment, and the community, that it is a role of story sharing, storytelling, and story choosing, which is what you're really diving into. And this, I'm going to ping the question back to you as we go through 3 different questions for you all. It's around really that idea of whose story do you tell, and how do you ensure that everybody is getting all of the stories. You said something earlier that one of the things that you did in your paper route was get to know the neighbors, get to talk to the neighbors, meet them. They got to know you too. They got that human connection. So important in our country is to understand that people have different viewpoints. People have different perspectives on issues in the news, in our local news and our national news. It puts us at odds with each other, with our neighbors at times. So my question for you is how important do you believe, and what are the tactics that you're taking to ensure that viewpoint diversity is a part of your craft when at the opinion desk and news reporting and in the work, in the choices of the images that you put front and center as well?
Yeah, I think we have to have the difficult conversations every day at the start of the process of news gathering. So that's at the point at which someone pitches a story, and through the discussion with editors in terms of a daily news meeting, we have to be more discerning. And I think that while we are living in a polarizing climate, there's also this undercurrent of kind of not being honest or direct. If something isn't a good idea or isn't the best story, we need to be able to be honest with each other and say, this isn't actually the way that we need to take this. We need to go and have this perspective, and we need to also consider another person's point of view. And I think some of those conversations, as someone who's been doing this almost 30 years, they've dissipated in trying to create an environment where everyone's welcome and we're all going to get along. The people don't understand actually debate is very much necessary in democracy, and it's very much necessary in the newsroom. So we're going to have instances where we have a critical feedback exchange, and that's okay. We have to be respectful, but in order to ensure what you stated as the ultimate goal is to have a rich news report with lots of points of view, we actually have to kind of, we have to be comfortable with we might have actually missed something, because we all, as the Maynard Institute says, we all have fault lines, whereas we all have gaps where we don't actually know that we see our bias. So could we have that conversation openly and honestly? And I think that's one of the key ways to kind of get to that point. But lastly, on a daily basis, just really putting at the forefront the people who have been marginalized, or even just the people who are not readily showing up in news reports, and also the persons who over-index to certain stereotypes, whether it's crime, sports, arts, which usually, we can, do a content analysis, and Black males tend to be in those three areas. So we have to actually strategically as editors work to say, you know what, we're doing a story on education and the new curriculum that so-and-so district's releasing. We need to have some diversity in that story too. I spoke with someone earlier this morning and talked about aspirational beats, because all I can think about is the things I want to grow, I'd like for us to have some additional community beats that are real specific so that we're intentional about coverage. LGBTQ plus is an example. We don't have an LGBTQ plus reporter at this time. We have in the past in the newsroom. And through some restructuring, that person went on to another role in the company. And the reason for that is so that we're not just having an LGBTQ subject or focus when we're doing an LGBTQ topic. We need to see LGBTQ people in all stories, correct, right? It sounds so simple and basic, but that's really at the editor level where this intention needs to take place. And so I just want to say and welcome, healthy debate. I mean, I love hearing about people's other ideas. I like people challenging me. I never show up to a meeting wanting someone to think what I think. I actually am gravitated to people that think different, because it's great to hear another point of view and perspective. And I think back to the affirmation that we have to actually celebrate that. So as leaders, we have to actually go out of our way to say good job to someone who may be slightly introverted, or someone who's doing something off the beaten path. And people model like positive peer pressure there. People sometimes model that work. Is it a perfect science? No. Do we need more feedback from external, community members? Yes. But we build trust by being earnest and intentional about that strategy. And again, my DMs are open, and so are my email is open for more feedback on how we can continue to do that better.
It's unbelievably powerful to think about. You can't have viewpoint diversity in the news that you put out when your newsroom isn't diverse.
Correct.
And doesn't have the opportunity to have a healthy civic dialogue within your own. So it happens at every level of the organization. And there's humility that you speak of there as well. When somebody points out a different perspective, the humility of somebody else to hear and listen to that other perspective.
May I mention one? In the converse of internal to news structure and staff, it's also important as leaders that we don't pigeonhole staff. So the Black reporter doesn't have to do the George Floyd 3rd year anniversary story. We have to be intentional about, and in order to improve our cultural relationships internal and how we're also communicating with communities, we have to actually coach people from other experiences to take on those stories. Because if you're in fact an expert reporter or a highly skilled reporter or journalist, you are capable of doing whatever's assigned to you, right? So we have to have those honest conversations and not pigeonhole. And like Lisa, we're very proud of the newsroom structure. The majority of my direct reports are female. If you'd like to stand, there's a bunch of them in the room. My managers, I see at least 4 or 5 of them. We have people, they're being shy, but they're doing a great job. There's more than 2 here, but we have a majority female staff as well. But yes, we have to have these these internal moments where we actually, in times it can feel like constructive criticism. But here's the thing, as a marginalized person, when I leave the office every day, I don't walk around with a backpack. I mean, I live my life like a Black person because I am subjected to discrimination. I have life experiences of racism. So I shared with my colleagues, I am actually not going to treat you like I have been treated. And we've had these very open conversations. I'm very intentional. I shared with some white staff members, guess what? I'm going to hire white people and I'm going to promote them. Just having that open conversation that I'm not here to promote one kind of person, a person of color. I'm here to lead and work with and promote everyone and have an environment where everybody feels like they have a stake in it and they're a part of it. And I think we just have to put it on the table, and that's one way for me to develop trust with the team and for them to feel like they can come talk to me about their thinking and their feeling, about who we're hiring and what the makeup of the staff is and all of those things as we're working in a very diverse city and market. Those are some of the things that I know as a news leader, and Errin, as a founder, you're also grappling with, like the makeup of the staff, what are our intentional purpose around hiring decisions, and I just want to hire the best people. Women tend to be the best person a lot of the time. But I want to hire the best people, the best journalists.
Yeah, we're not going to disagree with that up here. And I think what I've heard over and over again, it's about doing these amazing, powerful things that you're doing, you're spelling out for all of us to learn from, but it's building trust.
Right.
And so, Lisa, I'm going to ping to you on this one. Access sometimes gives people a positive or negative view of trust. Access to the news. And so how can media outlets balance the need for revenue generation, but also watch the clickbait kind of versions of the media that is put out there? We know, we want everybody to have access to great, high quality news, but at the end of the day, we still have to pay our writers, our photographers, our teams, our staff, acceptable and professional wages for the hard work they're doing so they can thrive in this democracy as well. How do you create that level of trust in media outlets, but also pay attention to the bottom line?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of questions in there. So first of all, we're a for-profit business. We're owned by the Lenfest Institute, which is a nonprofit that Jerry Lenfest set up. This genius model, nonprofit, owns a for-profit business, and what that allows us is to have access to philanthropy as a revenue stream in addition to consumer revenue, subscriptions, and advertising revenue, some of the more traditional models. So that, first of all, is a very promising model that is being watched nationally, emulated in some cases. The Baltimore Banner is an example of that. And what that means is we have to turn a profit. We just don't have to turn a certain percentage profit to a hedge fund, and we can reinvest in the business. So we're lucky in Philadelphia that we have the Lenfest Institute that funds so much of our great work. Your point about being able to pay professional journalists. We practice the craft of journalism. We are fact-based newsroom. We go out, we talk to people, how important that is, and actually report based on sources and confirming those sources. And it's not just a blog that someone writes, unsubstantiated, whatever. So we have our newsroom to get the right point of view. Obviously, we've talked a lot about how the representation in your newsroom, but you've got to pay those people. What we do doesn't come out of the faucet. These are professional journalists at the top of their game. These are photographers, these are engineers, these are digital storytellers, these are writers, these are editors, and so on. And so that costs money. The second part of our business is, okay, how do we drive revenue? How do we pay for that? We all know newspapers have been disrupted by the platforms. It used to be an ad-based business, now it's a consumer revenue-based business. So, you can come in and read anything you want, and after a certain number of articles, you will hit a paywall. We meter our stories. So we let you sample. All of our newsletters are free, 21 plus. All of our Inquirer Lives are free. Our podcasts are free. But we ask you to sample, and then after you've sampled enough, we invite you to subscribe. I think that's a fair business model. If you think about going into Boyd's, are we allowed to wear a dress and not pay for it and then have another and another before you're invited to buy it? So, we do care about sampling, but we absolutely have to charge for our content, and I believe in charging for content. When it's very essential news, like all the stuff about COVID that we reported for years, all of our live blog, our water safety issue that we had just a few weeks ago, where we were all, do we drink bottled water? What's the up to the minute? We broke that story, by the way. Reporter got the tip at night and then just stayed with that story. We broke it at 9 a.m. that morning, but have that round-the-clock newsroom costs money. Essential journalism like that, we always unmeter. So if it's really public safety info, that's unmetered. But we have a for-profit business model, and I'm not apologetic for that.
Great, fantastic. Errin, again, staying on this theme of trust, what can the news media do to increase public trust? And then I'm going to give you a second parter to this because I love two-parter questions.
So do we.
What is the responsibility of the individual to ensure that the media that they are not only receiving but sharing is a trusted source as well? So what is the role of the media in this building of trust for information from our democracy, and the role of the individual?
Yeah. So a lot of what Sarah and Lisa were talking about, and what I think is part of the answer to the two-parter that you just asked me, intentionality is behind everything that we are talking about. Public trust is not something that is necessarily organic just because, we have a newsroom that, that exists, and we say that we are, covering politics and gender, and we want to include everybody who wants, who cares about our democracy. We have to, we do have an obligation to earn the trust of our audiences, and that is something that we work to do every single day at the 19th, and it's not easy, right? We know in this polarized climate, the media is on the receiving end of a lot of that polarization, right? And so there is a skepticism, and there's not kind of just an assumed goodness in local journalism, national journalism, and in fact there is only increased kind of skepticism and scorn for what we do in some corners. And so what that means for us is that we go out every day and we tell the truth, and we are looking for, again, those people who have been unseen and unheard in our democracy, that regardless of ideology or geography, that we are trying to engage with those folks in good faith conversations about who and where we are as a country. And the more that we continue to do that, I do believe that it does make a difference. Certainly in just the 3 years that the 19th has been in existence, we are talking to, like I said, all kinds of people who have felt left out, right? And even just thinking about, again, what it means to participate in this democracy. Who gets to be a faith voter? Who gets to be somebody who cares about education? Who gets to be somebody who cares about the Supreme Court, right? For people who are normally not asked about those things, for the women who are always only asked about the pay gap or abortion. It's like, well, that's not all that women care about, right? Or LGBTQ people. We know that they don't just care about LGBTQ issues, right? They also care about health care, or they also care about the economy. You can ask them about those things as well. And so for us to do that, the light bulb goes off and says, oh, well, maybe these people actually are serious about seeing me, about including me in this conversation. And I think that does go a long way. I think for individuals, really, we have gotten so siloed, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of the news that we are consuming, right? Folks that only want news that affirms a certain point of view that they have. Yeah. What Sarah was saying was so important about being open to listening to folks who don't necessarily share the same opinion as you. I've talked to so many people who are repeatedly saying, I had to cut my aunt off on Facebook, or I shut down my cousin, on Instagram because I just did not like what I was seeing on that person's timeline. You are the main person that can probably help to change that person's mind if they are getting misinformation, disinformation, right? They're not necessarily going to listen to me when they see me on MSNBC because I hate MSNBC, right? And that's fine. I get it. Or they hate my glasses or my hair or whatever else they want to email me about. But seriously, if I see my niece, has seen some story on TikTok that is ridiculous, I am the one that is able to say, actually, the story that you saw about COVID or vaccines or whatever, that's actually not real. And let me show you something that is more accurate, right? Me sharing that with her as somebody who is her family member that she trusts, who she does not expect to lie to her, right, can be helpful. And so for individuals, I would say don't give up on your family members, on your friends who may not necessarily share the same ideas as you, or who may not necessarily be getting their news from the same places as you, because we need each other. We need to be in conversation. We need to be having that civic dialogue. That is something that has become lost in the polarization of our communities, and frankly, the erosion of local journalism is a big driver of that. And so I'm certainly a subscriber of the Inquirer. I'm a proud subscriber of the Inquirer, and I would say that even if I was not a LendFest board member. But it's because, no, seriously, it's because I believe in the power of local journalism to tell me what's happening, and I expect them to tell me what's going on in my community, and because I am a journalist and I know the caliber of work that is happening among my colleagues, not just here, but across the country. I subscribe to a lot of papers that I care about because I believe in it, and because I know how important it is, and I know what fills the void in the absence of that. And so for individuals, if you believe in that, if you believe in community, if you understand that there's a relationship between democracy and the media, support local journalism.
Thank you for that.
We are wrapping up with this final speed round here. So real quick, one thing that each of us, any of us, could do to uplift a woman in our lives. One thing.
One thing we could do to uplift a woman in our lives. Well, we're coming up on the 60th anniversary of the Equal Pay Act. So I would say pay women. Pay women. Yeah. And also, you know, I'm a big believer in shine theory, like Sarah said. Lift up another woman. When you shine, I shine. Both
Definitely.
of my co-panelists here, I will toot their horn anywhere, because I know their commitment to this work, I know their commitment to leadership, and I know their commitment to bringing others along, so that I do believe that there's strength in numbers. So yes, lift as we climb and help another woman.
Perfect.
Yes.
Lisa?
Yeah, help just because someone asks you to. Also, if you see something happening, don't sit idly by. Quick story, young woman I had just met on the team who said to me, this was the phrase, I know this is not my lane, but, and I'd like, stop right there, stop right there. Never start a sentence with that ever again, and never work for somebody who says you can't go outside of your lane. So now what's your great idea?
Nice.
And so, you know, like jump in and help right there in the moment, or tell someone to come. Literally, you know, we've all read Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In. How many times have you been in a meeting where the women come in and sit on the side and not at the conference table? It's like, sit at the table.
In the middle.
Right here. Seat right here.
Encourage her. I love that.
Awesome. And last but not least, Sarah?
Yeah, I would go back to maybe part of the theme that I've already spoken about, and that's just like be truthful. Because I guess as I've gotten older, I'm a little sad sometimes on people who aren't being honest with me. They're just kind of like taking me around the block and across the street and back over, and it's just like, the sky is blue, the grass is green. Just tell me what it is. Like, and I just think we could help each other out so much if we were just honest and truthful. And if you see something that could be helpful to a colleague, and particularly an emerging woman professional or a peer, just to let them know, you know, just to be honest and transparent. And then I think if I could have a part two, it's just don't hold grudges and don't judge, because I'm also, that kind of makes me sad. Like if someone did something to somebody, they come over and tell me as if I'm supposed to have that same grudge against so-and-so. And these, you know, professional people do this too. It's not just mean girls in high school. It's like, let's let it go. You know, like don't judge people. Like let it go. Like what happens today, you talk, if you told the truth today, you address it with the person. Tomorrow's a new day. Like let it go. You're gonna have lower blood pressure. You'll live longer. You'll be happier. I said that with my first staff meetings. I was like, I don't want to talk about what so-and-so did to you in 2017. Wow. You know, let's talk about 2022 and 2023 and 2024 and how we're moving forward, and just try to keep that positive vibe, because it's so important, because there's so many negative things out there we can't control, but we can actually control that in our environment. And so just try to lift people up, please.
Unbelievable. I kicked off my morning reading a line from a famous female author, and she summed it up by saying, live your life being aware, listening carefully, And remember to not only give help, but ask for help when you need it. That is okay as well. I can't be more grateful for this unbelievable panel, for Lauren Christella, the new head of Committee of 70, and learning from all of you today. Thank you so much. Go forth and help others, and don't forget to lift up others as you